Professor Jamus Lim.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm wondering if I could obtain a clarification from the member on why he feels that the revelation of reserves would necessarily be destabilizing. And I'll just point out a few reasons why I disagree. And the first is that revealing a target as well as reserves certainly could encourage destabilizing speculation, but it could also encourage stabilizing speculation. If we were off our fundamentally determined exchange rates, we could encourage market participants to actually engage in speculative activity that will get us back on to our fundamental exchange rate. And this, in fact, was a point that was routinely argued by the inventor of the band basket crawl system, John Williamson, for which we, the MES at least, subscribes to, the BBC system. The second point I would like to point out is that actually, while it is convenient to argue that we have a distinct system in terms of exchange rate policy, by purchasing power parity, all exchange rate policy is in fact monetary policy. So even though it is the case that we target explicitly the exchange rate, it will have implications for inflation. And hence, when other countries, as the member has cited, such as Norway, reveal that they have a certain amount of reserves and they are subscribers to an inflation targeting regime, it is not in fact distinct from our own exchange rate targeting regime.
Mrs. Saktiandi, do you want to respond?
So, the Honourable Professor Jamus Lim, if I can try to recall your first question and second, I'll probably take your second question first. Second question is about, if I can recall again, Professor, you asked whether on the first one there is stabilizing and destabilizing currency at speculative attacks.
I'm suggesting that
and it's stabilizing.
That speculation can both be destabilizing as well as stabilizing.
Okay, so I just want to share with you. I started off working in the MES back in 98, 99. The impact of the currency attacks can never be stabilizing. It has ramifications on the economy. It has ramifications on jobs. But back in the Asian financial crisis, the impact on the currencies that were specifically attacked, like Thailand, and even to some extent other countries in ASEAN region, was very significant, to the point that the currencies depreciated so much and that it led to the ramifications and cascading effects on the economy. So what I saw in the Asian financial crisis, which is a perfect example of a speculative attack, led to economic ramifications that are not destabilizing at all. And that's from my own lived experience in 1998, 1999. Not theory. So the theoretical element that you shared from a theory perspective, that there can be a destabilizing impact of currency adjustments or misalignments, can be stabilizing. Maybe in theory does not make sense as well, unless you're talking about misalignments in the long run that eventually corrects itself in time. Yeah. So that's the first question.
Yeah, if I may clarify, I should point out that I am, in fact, old enough to have also lived through the Asian financial crisis, and I'm aware of the conditions surrounding it. So this is not just in theory, it was also my lived experience.
Okay. Your second question, Professor Jamus?
The monetary policy is the same, Norway's policy.
Norway's policy. How is it different from the Singapore's policy? If I may put it in general terms?
No, I was pointing out that I did not think that there were distinct policies, because all exchange rate policy is in fact monetary policy, and I'm wondering if you could clarify why you thought they were distinct.
Okay. Let me try to explain to you.
Okay, Mr. Saktiandi, can you just, can the two of you just speak to the chair and just clarify the point?
Yeah. Madam Speaker, to answer the question about the difference between Norway's monetary policy and Singapore's monetary policy, they're very distinct. I mentioned in my speech about the different economic context of Norway, where it's a petrol-driven economy, and where Singapore is a very trade-driven economy. And the reliance of using exchange rate as a controllable intermediate target in the Singapore economy is very distinct from Norway, which uses a policy rate, interest rate or deposit rates in its central bank. So the instrument being used, I think the important issue here when you're talking about reserves, in this situation for Singapore, when Singapore uses exchange rate as its policy tool, there is a direct intervention in the markets using currency spot to have a direct impact on the Sing dollar. And that is very specific because we target the exchange rate. If you look at Norway, Norway uses policy rates and its exchange rate is freely floated. So for Singapore's case, the very fact that we target an intermediate target of an exchange rate has some impact in terms of our ability to directly intervene in the markets and thus run down on our reserves from MAS reserves. So there is a very direct impact from a policy perspective and thus ramifications on our ability to have a direct rundown on reserves. Whereas for Norway's case, the policy target is totally different. It's using policy rates or interest rates.
Okay, Mr. Saktiandi, thank you for clarifying. I think we can move on.